What's up, friends, and welcome into Week 1 reactions right here on Fantasypros. I'm Chris Welsh. We got Scott Bogman with me and Deepak Chona. We're breaking down all the game action. We are going to try to find where in the hell Marvin Harrison went, because I got no idea. We'll see if Deepak knows. And of course, Deepak is here because we've got injuries. We've got it all, plus you guys, and the best reminder I can possibly give. There's a lot of podcast listeners in here, but anybody that's watching us live on the stream, James was the very first comment in the stream today, and he's right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just week one. It's just week one. It's just week one. It's just week one. It's just week one before we freak out, because I have plenty of things that I'm ready to freak out about. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. We're doing it all. Mr. Scott Bogman, your Pittsburgh Steelers won. I know you're happy. Yes? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, hey, who doesn't love kicking 6 field goals for a dub, right? All my Boswell shares were helping me in my kicker leagues too. So, yeah, had a nice day.
Very Arthur Smith going on. Deepak Chona, Sport MD Analysis. Deepak, I haven't seen you in quite some time. How are you, my friend? Are you ready to disappoint some people here shortly?
Yeah, I'm ready to disappoint some people, but not going to be any Texans fans today, thankfully.
Yeah, no, it won't. But there are some people. One of the first few comments in here are injuries. So let's do it. Let's talk about the injuries. We do have a board, but we had some late game things happen. So let's kind of go down the list. There's a couple that we don't have any art for because they just happened. One of which was just like 15, 20 minutes ago as we're recording this. Let's talk about Ken Walker. Ken Walker left with an abdomen issue, and he was questionable to return, which most likely means he's not after going for 100 yards and they had the game in. It seems kind of nonchalant, and it could be a bit about nothing, but I know there's some injury history in there. Is there any concern with Ken Walker moving forward with this?
It's really worth monitoring. I would say I wouldn't be super concerned initially. The reason is that as you said, they had the game basically in hand. They have a really strong backup in Charbonnet. And so with Kenneth Walker, though, the key is that he's had hernia surgery in the past. And so that's kind of the same area a lot of core and abdominal injuries get played through, especially by running backs, but you do tend to see a little bit of a workload dip when they come back. So with Kenneth Walker, everything's going to basically be told to us by the practice reports. Hopefully he'll be able to log at least some limited sessions this coming week and play, but just definitely worth monitoring because, as you said, there is a history there.
Boggs, would there be any like Charbonnet? Let's say he's a little bit limited this week. Would there be something for you with maybe Charbonnet being like a flex play, even if we know Walker's going to be active?
For sure. I mean, Charbonnet had a good game today, too. I mean, that was a stomping against the Broncos, really worse than the score had, for sure. But yeah, Charbonnet would be up. He is a for real 3-down back if he gets the opportunity.
The other ones, we had some tight end injuries, and probably the worst looking was Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson got his knee kind of caught up, hobbled down, immediately started grabbing it. We can all have our assertions of where that's going to be. So Deepak, what do you think we're in store for with Jake Ferguson?
Yeah, the video is most convincing to me that there's an MCL sprain there, and that would honestly kind of be best case scenario. The other concern there is going to be your ACL. So with Jake Ferguson, obviously the latter of those two would be a season ender, but they're calling it a knee injury, which tells us it probably wasn't the ankle, even though that did look like a high ankle mechanism potentially there too. My guess is probably MCL, but fingers crossed that it's not worse.
Boy, Boggs, I mean, if Isaiah Likely wasn't already going to be just some wild waiver claim in here, you got, if Ferguson is out, that's a top 12, if he's available, of course, by the way. But like 2 top 12 tight end injuries with any missed time is only going to... We might see the first week ever where we see a tight end go for the number one waiver claim. Is there any replacement behind Ferguson that you think would have any fantasy value, even if it's not even at tight end, if you think someone else picks up the slack?
No, I think Schoonmaker would be the guy, good weapon at Michigan, but at Michigan, all they had to do was have him run block like everybody else. So I think he could be a good replacement if this is a long-term injury for Ferguson.
And then the final one before we get to our board of what kind of happened early in a little preview was David Njoku. David Njoku got knocked out a little bit later in the game. Deepak, what type of long-term, is there any like outside of this week concern? Do we think we're going to have games missed?
Yeah, well, Njoku was limping pretty significantly on the sideline on the way to the locker room. Obviously, you hope that x-rays are going to be negative. We'll find that out pretty quickly, usually right after the game. And if that's the case, then you're looking at a sprain, which can, for tight ends, especially their bigger bodies. So you're often looking at least 1 week out, but we'll kind of have to follow the practice reports on that one. But again, hopefully no fracture, which would be the best case here.
Boggs, is there a secondary tight end, like likely we would assume is going to be the guy for wherever he is available? But with these injuries going on, is there somebody out there that's under that, top 12 tight end? Bowers probably is not going to qualify. Is there any tight end that you're going to be looking at into waivers this week, maybe for a replacement that comes to mind?
Likely is obviously the biggest one here. The rest of those guys, maybe
Okonkwo, he got the touchdown.
Okonkwo had the touchdown. I do want to see snap percentages, but there were so many disappointing tight ends this week. It's kind of hard to say. I think your boy Kraft, like, he played way over Musgrave on Friday night. I think that guy is probably going to be pretty high on people's, for all these tight end injuries. He's going to be a big pickup this week.
You're actually right. I think that is it. And I threw that on you. We'll talk about it this week here on Fantasy Pros. All the podcasts, we are going to be blowing out all the coverage, and we will start it out early, obviously, with what waivers is going to look like. Likely and Kraft are probably 1-2. So the injury board, this is what we walked in with. We also had a Jordan Addison injury on his ankle. Keenan Allen, he left for a bit. I don't know if he came back. He had a foot injury. Those were the 2 early game injuries. So let's just hit that real quick. Deepak, what concerns do you have on Addison or Keenan Allen as far as future games missed?
Yeah, so Addison is probably the most concerning of those. And the reason is that he looked like he re-aggravated what was already a known high ankle injury going into this week. And that's one of the risks of rushing back. And he came back about 2.5 weeks after he sustained the injury in training camp. So with that in mind, usually re-aggravations are worse than the original. So you usually would see him miss at least 1 game. But with that being said, they've announced that he avoided a major injury. Now, what that means probably is that an MRI is pending tomorrow, and we'll find out more after. but my suspicion is Addison probably misses at least one game.
I heard those. Oh, sorry. I heard those cop sirens. I say, is Tyreek leaving the stadium? Is that what's going on?
H-Town, baby.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, H-Town. And then Keenan Allen, they didn't give us a lot of info here, but he was questionable at points during this week going in with a heel issue. And then he's got an extensive soft tissue history too. So with those two in mind, plus his age, you look at Keenan Allen as already a high-risk player. So any news on him is kind of high risk to begin with. So Keenan Allen, we don't really have a diagnosis yet, but the foot is the main concern.
The other three we've got on here, the injuries to monitor, they weren't today things, but we've got Christian McCaffrey, who's just kind of held this questionable tag. They threw Achilles thing out there. I don't know. I mean, they've laid on to this, but he's had great practices. T. Higgins did not play today. He had this hamstring injury, and Jordan Love obviously suffered the MCL sprain earlier in the week. We know he's going to miss 3 to 6 weeks. Love to get your take just real quick. Do you think there's anything to be concerned about with McCaffrey? Will T. Higgins be back in week 2? And can Jordan Love beat the timeline?
Yeah, McCaffrey, when he's out there, since he's had about almost 6 weeks to rest since they started talking about this calf issue, he's probably going to be just fine and play at over 90% of his normal production. The question with him is re-injury. These calf issues, you probably remember Joe Burrow last year, they can get re-injured, and especially a running back, you're always on your toes. So that would be the concern there. However, with T. Higgins, the concern is he even going to be available week 2? And the reason is that the average hamstring takes 2 weeks for a wide receiver, and his was kind of in the middle of this week. I think it was Thursday when they first announced it. So with that in mind, T. Higgins the data would favor him slightly missing week 2. It's possible that he plays, but we got to watch those practice reports carefully. And then with Jordan Love, they did announce 3 to 6 weeks. My guess is 2 to 4 is probably more realistic, in the sense that quarterbacks tend to come back a little bit faster. And when they do come back, they usually see a dip in their rushing production for about 6 weeks. Passing doesn't usually take a hit, though. So Jordan Love, there's some reason for optimism. I think they're conservative with the initial reporting. And there was a mention that they might be getting a second opinion as well. So I think Jordan Love, there's a little bit more optimistic than the reports have led on so far.
Deepak Chona, Sport MD Analysis, the literal best in the business. Make sure to follow him on Twitter, everything that you going on. Deepak, it's so great to see you, and it's going to be good talking to you all season long. Just start bringing us some good news occasionally.
You got it, guys. Good to see you.
All right, thanks, Deepak. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be doing all the breakdowns and reacting right after this. Yeah, we're all passionate about fantasy football, obviously. But sometimes there is a little bit missing. What's missing? A team. But not your fantasy team. No, a team of like-minded, passionate fantasy football fans. And if that is not part of your everyday, Fantasy Pros Discord might be your answer. Chat with other fans, debate strategies, and find leagues to join. Every week, get your questions answered live in our AMA live Discord sessions. Want to know if you should start that sleeper or avoid a risky trade? Our experts, they're here to help. And if you got a question, you might even end up on a podcast. It's not just about advice, though. It's about community, with channels for every aspect of fantasy football, draft advice, waivers, props to dynasty, best ball, and a ton more. You're going to find like-minded fans just like you. So join the best fantasy team. Join Fantasy Pros on Discord at fantasypros.com/chat today. Get your questions answered and connect with fans. Don't just play fantasy football, live it with Fantasy Pros on Discord. Thanks so much there, Welsh. I really appreciate that. You got to love having me as our transition piece there, Bogman. I love having that. Thank you guys so much. We're ready to react. Want to remind everybody, full slate of everything going on this week. Monday, Tuesday, we got live streams. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros. Notifications on, because we got tons of stuff getting you prepped for week 2, but we are reacting here and have some prizes. Going to tell you about that here in just a tiny bit. One quick note before we get into the breaks. Mayor gave us an update. Is Ken Walker was talking to the media right after the game, and apparently he's okay. So there's an injury update literally within the podcast that he said he's fine. Doesn't seem like it's a big thing. So thank you.
I was about to throw up. So good. I have a lot of Ken Walker shares. So
Save your throwing up for looking at my betting card this week. So
I look at my own college one. It's okay.
Yeah, it's brutal. I'm going to have to pick myself up. Bogman, let's break down some games. Let's start reacting to this. And let's kick it off with the Pittsburgh Steelers against the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah. And it was not an enjoyable game to watch unless you were a Steeler fan. We were kind of back to old school, no Drake London again. Like after the game, it's like, we've got to get Drake London involved. Okay. We did have Bijan. We had some Kyle Pitts. Kirk Cousins didn't look great. Your Steelers were a little bit messy, but Justin Fields starts. So give us a breakdown on this Steeler-Falcons game, and what do we need to know?
Yeah, I think the big thing to take away here is Jaylen Warren not seeing the field nearly as much as we thought. He was out there for 22 snaps, but the Steelers had 69 total snaps. Najee was in on 38. So just not a lot. Najee even ran more routes than him, which is a little surprising. Maybe it's just week one. He's coming off an injury. Maybe they just limited him a little bit, but that I think is something to look at. Pat Freiermuth, not a great game here. Obviously, Justin Fields, just not a lot of throwing. It was, Pickens had 7 targets. Freiermuth had 4 catches for 27 yards on his 4 targets. No other Steelers saw more than 2 targets. So it's going to be limited in terms of who is catching the ball in Pittsburgh, obviously, like it always is under Arthur Smith. And Bijan way over Tyler Algier. It was 50 snaps to 10. So they said CMC-like usage, and they showed us CMC-like usage.
And that was I think that was like so key. Like there's a lot of stuff. If you want to just focus on the Falcons for a second, Drake London getting 3 targets is unacceptable. And especially because you had a lot of people that were like heavily invested. I want to say Debro might've been one of the guys. We had some people. It's like, hey, he's going to be, top 10, maybe break inside the top 10 of wide receivers. But I guess you could throw Pitts into this as well. He got the touchdown, but to see 6 targets go to those guys is absolutely maddening to people and frustrating. But the silver lining was to see the commitment to Bijan Robinson early on. In the pass game, he didn't really get it going the first half as far as running until he could, I guess the Steeler defense needed to break down a little bit. But like what he was doing on the receiving side, going over 100 total yards, like that I think was like a really key, like positive. But unfortunately, like you're kind of alluding to, there were more negatives from a fantasy perspective that came out of this. What were the positives? Najee up, Bijan up. What are the negatives? Jalen down. I don't know if you say London and Pitts are down. They're going to
see the passing game. Look, the offensive line really, and it may just be the Steelers' defensive line is really good, right? And they won the game for Pittsburgh. It's no doubt. Maybe that's it, but that O-line looked bad for Atlanta. I think that's the major concern, more than just one player. It's the overall play of the O-line.
Yeah, and something to watch for Bijan, like moving forward too, is gonna, if you care about like betting and stuff, might be on the receiving side. Like he really is gonna pay off on the in like the PPR and even half PPR. But also like if Kirk Cousins is gonna be just another guy in this offense again, and everyone's gonna be screaming for Michael Penix, how many touchdown opportunities are gonna be there? Pittsburgh Steelers defense is still tougher. This was a tough matchup, but I think there was a lot of what we expected. But Algier dipping down, really interesting. The backup, the amount of teams that had backup running backs have less usage was a little bit surprising. And just some of the RB things were less surprising as well. Pittsburgh has got Denver next week, and Atlanta has got Philly on Monday Night Football. Something to be on the lookout for. Is there anything else in this game that you wanted to hit from a fantasy perspective?
I don't think so. Let's go to the next one.
How about the Buffalo Bills and the Arizona Cardinals? This one was scary to start. Arizona ended up covering, by the way. That's 6.5 points, 28-34. Buffalo did end up winning, almost ruining. We're playing in this, it's called the Pentathlon, and it's a bunch of events. One of the events is a Survivor. And there were 4 teams in all of it that didn't have either the Bills or the Bengals. And we were one of those. We had the Saints, and we were sitting nice and pretty.
By the way, just the easiest no sweat of the week, by the way.
Didn't even worry about it until like the 5 minutes into the game. Bills almost eliminated a lot of people. But let's take that back. I would say I want to get your snap count and all this stuff in here. One of the most fascinating things, though, was the wide receiver depth chart of the Bills versus what the production was. And I know you're going to hit that because Keon Coleman was a man on the way down, but I think the snaps were telling us something different.
Well, not only did he lead Buffalo in receiving yards, and I believe he led in targets, he led in snaps. So this is how you can ignore the week 1 depth charts. And what they showed us in the preseason is what they did. It was Coleman and Hollins on the field more than anybody else. Shakir over Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel was the odd man out. So Keon Coleman is the main guy now. It looks like. We'll see. They are playing. They are playing on Thursday night, so it's a quick game. But that was pretty nice. The other side, though, for the Cardinals, we do have a little bit of a concern there.
Where in God's name did Marvin Harrison go? We know one place that he was wide open at the end of the game. Wide open. Unbelievably wide open. Kyler Murray was not looking to Marvin Harrison. This was another one of those. He was targeted 3 times in this game. I'm not super surprised about the Dortch thing, but I think I was surprised that he almost 3-time over the targets to Marvin Harrison. He had 8 targets in this game. He ended up catching 6 for 47. McBride led in targets. That's, again, not a surprise, but Dortch was the main. It might have been more of a safety net thing, but Michael Wilson was not much, but he got the touchdown. What was the problem with Marvin Harrison, Boggs?
I honestly don't know, because they had a bunch of snaps. He had 61 total, and he was in 55. He led all Cardinals wide receivers in snaps. So he also had 36 routes run. So he is still the number 1 on the team. He's still probably going to be the first look. I think this is just, a lack of communication and just a bad game. Maybe a good game plan from Buffalo. Obviously, I didn't get to see the entirety of this game, but it was a lot of snaps, and he led, and he didn't see a lot of targets. So it's concerning. Is it actionable? Absolutely not. It's week 1, like our mantra when we started. It's week 1. It's week.
Well,
one.
I have an action for you. I know I have an action item for you.
Okay.
Go and trade for Marvin Harrison right now if people want to do it. This is a Joe thing. I'm telling you right now. I'm reading into the future. PCP is going to be on Fantasy Pros on Monday or Tuesday, saying what you do is you go out, you call the Marvin, you hit him up, you blah, blah, blah. You find the Marvin Harrison owner and you see if you can get the discount. I think there's a rightful reason to be worried. The smart person is going to, again, what James said, it's week 1. It's week 1. It's like Beetlejuice. It's like if we say it 3 times, we can manifest it's just week 1. But there are plenty of people that are having panic attacks about their team and what's happening. I mean, I'm having a panic attack about the betting side. I had a phenomenal fantasy week in week 1. Betting side messed me up. When we talk about the Cowboys, I'm going to have some tears in here. I think the actionable item would be going to try to go acquire Marvin Harrison if you can't. James Conner had a heavy dose. We also saw interesting. It looked like Benson ended up having some like a drive. It was Conner early on, and then they kind of went to DeMarcado and Benson on drives. Anything in the running game that you want to hit as far as James Cook, Ray Davis, James Conner, anything there?
Not really. I think that looked kind of like what we thought. Between Benson and DeMarcado had more snaps, so that behind James Conner is kind of iffy right now. Trey Benson might be a drop if there's somebody good on your wire, but not anything super concerning at this point.
Going over, by the way, they've got, let's see, Buffalo has got Miami. That's on Thursday Night Football. As you mentioned, that's kind of like the quick turnaround. And then the Rams are at Arizona next week. So if you're looking for those matchups, this game, the Chicago Bears played some of the worst football you could see in the first half, and they still ended up winning 24-17. Will Levis, you were kind of a Will Levis guy in the beginning of the season. I'm going to guess that's kind of gone. He made one of the dumbest plays you could possibly make. Caleb Williams, horrific debut. Really everything offensively for the Bears was bad. And when we talked about the Keenan Allen injury, Rome Odunze had, I think, 1 catch. It was on a couple targets. Nobody shined. Nobody looked great, but they got it done because of how bad the Titans were. Let's start with the Bears real quick. Any takeaways there from Caleb Williams? Caleb Williams trickles down to the other pieces.
Sure,
so I don't even know if it's if you're worried about Caleb Williams, then I think that can trickle into now you're worried about DJ Moore. You're not going to singularly be worried about one of the receivers. So what do you got on it?
Yeah, it's a rookie in his first start. It was a terrible game on both sides of these offenses, right? So this is a for real, like week 1 and game 1 for Caleb Williams. Bo Nix didn't look good either. Jay Daniels had his moments, but wasn't great overall. So the rookie QBs, you're not that concerned about. Will Levis, I have him as a 3 in a lot of spots where I don't. It's him and Sam Darnold are my number 3 QBs in a bunch of super flex leagues, but he looked bad. But on the Bears side, Kmet Kmet just had no snaps. He was behind Gerald Everett. He didn't run as many routes as Gerald Everett either. It was, Kmet is a drop at this point at tight end. He is not a savior at all.
No, he's not going to be one of those guys. On the Titans side, we got a big answer. And guess what? It wasn't just preseason mumbo jumbo, at least for week 1, where we saw Tony Pollard get that first run. And everyone's like, hey, maybe Tony Pollard is something. Well, guess what? Tony Pollard, 16 carries to Tajay Spears, 4. 82 yards for Pollard. He had a touchdown. He looked really solid. On the receiving side, Ridley had the most targets. They couldn't move the ball because Will Levis is not great. But the most concerning part of that was DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins was active. We know he's dealing with this potential MCL tear that's going on. He had 1 target. I think he played I saw that he played 1 of the first 3 or maybe 7. I don't know what it was. I don't know the series. I don't know if you have the snap count on DeAndre Hopkins, but what do you got on Pollard? Anything you want to throw on Hopkins? Because I don't think Hopkins is startable until they prove us otherwise.
No, and Hopkins had 17 snaps in this game. Treylon Burks had 44.
Wow.
So it was obvious they were keeping him on a pitch count right now because he still is better than Boyd and he's better than Burks if he's healthy. So this is all about health. So let's just read the tea leaves and hear what they have to say. And they said they're running with the hot hand at running back. The Titans did. Pollard is the hot hand, so he's the guy for now. Not saying that is going to stick forever. And the snaps were 39-29 in Pollard's favor. So it's not a giant advantage in terms of being on the field, but it was an advantage. So Pollard is the guy now.
But do you try? Are you going to trust Pollard moving forward?
Until he's not the guy, I will trust Pollard. Yeah.
I think that's
they can't pass it. Will Levis look like garbage, so they're going to run the ball a lot.
Ryan Tannehill's going to be a busy man. They're going to be like, please come back here. And the Packers are like, no, we got him first. Everyone wants Ryan Tannehill.
His phone is ringing. It's off the hook right now.
Most popular man is the one without a job. So there you go. The Jets, they're going to be facing off against Tennessee, and Chicago has got Houston on Sunday Night Football. Friends, before we move on, I want to tell you guys about an opportunity to win some stuff. Devontae Smith looked pretty good. I don't know if you guys saw how much his usage in the slot. Oh my, using him in the slot's the best thing you could possibly have. Well, except you can win that autographed helmet from Devontae Smith. That's right. If you want a chance to win the signed Devontae Smith Eagles helmet for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you got to do is head to fantasypros.com/contest. Complete the form and then either download the Fantasy Pros My Playbook app, leave a review for the podcast, or follow us on X, Instagram, or TikTok at Fantasy Pros. By the way, those are kind of and/ors because the more actions you complete, the more entries you actually receive. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and you can claim all the prizes, but specifically that Devonta Smith autograph helmet, which is pretty sweet. All right, let's go over to the New England-Cincinnati game, which was almost unwatchable. New England won 16-10. Jacoby Brissett led the way. Ramondre Stevenson, we talked about him on the Start and Sit show earlier this morning in the Q&A. I was heavy on trying to get him in there. 25, 120, and a score. There were a lot of people bringing him up. On the Bengals rushing side, they had no running game whatsoever, but it was heavily on Zach Moss. Let's start there. I want to hear your take. Chase Brown versus Zach Moss. Are you concerned? Because I think a lot of people, you were either like terrified. Well, there's a lot of people that were like, Tim Robinson, I'm not worried about it. But now after seeing this, they kind of led to the depth chart a little bit. Are you worried about Chase Brown?
I still think that this is a hot hand situation. And look, with Moss's injury history, I think we're just waiting for Chase Brown to take this job over in terms of skill and in terms of Moss's injury. But right now, it is Moss. He had 33 snaps to Chase Brown's 17. Obviously, the Bengals offense looked miserable as a whole. So maybe there are some changes just because of that. But I think the changes are, let's get T. Higgins back. Let's get Chase a full week of practice and healthy now that he's signed and under the deal. And, Burrow just looked awful. So the whole offense didn't look good against New England. And I think Moss is the guy until otherwise, just like we said, Pollard is the guy until otherwise. Yeah,
this is a weird situation where I do look at this and I'm like, I don't know if there's anything to really take out of this, except I will have Chase Brown down a little bit further, just like you said, until like prove me otherwise at this point, because even when they couldn't run, like Moss was more effective, and he got 4 targets. He had more targets than Chase Brown out of the backfield as well. So I think that's him. On the Patriots side, just real quick, I don't mean to be dismissive because they just won, but it's kind of like there's nothing really viable here except Ramondre Stevenson. Like Ramondre Stevenson played really well. He was a huge fantasy asset on the receive. Is there somebody you liked a little bit more? I mean, Pop Douglas only ended up having 3 targets. Nothing happened. Polk had 1 target in the game. I think the only startable Patriot at this point, unless you are deep desperate, is Ramondre.
Yeah, they all mixed in. It was, just in terms of snaps, it was 39 for Osborne. He ran 14 routes. So not much. He was mainly in there to block. DeMario had 22 routes, which was the most, but 38 snaps, 37 for Thornton with 21 routes, 35 for Polk with 18 routes. So it was just a lot of mixture there, and no one really stood out. And I think it can safely be ignored until someone does. And Baker wasn't even active, Javon Baker. So yeah, it was just a mess.
Seattle's got New England. Kansas City is going to be hosting Cincinnati. And just to throw it out there, if the Bengals are that bad as far as like, rush defense is going to go, it might be a big, not that you wouldn't start Pacheco or something like that, but might be like a nice Pacheco week that's coming up. Cincinnati's got a rough go after losing that one. Houston, they beat the Colts 29-27. This was a wildly entertaining game. Anthony Richardson with not 1, but 2 of the best passes we're probably going to see all season. That one where he was being hit fade back, where he threw it looked like 65 yards in the air, was absolutely incredible. He ended up with, you would have thought, by the way, he would have had like 400 passing yards, but he ended up having only 212 and not
9 completions.
That's why
9 for 19.
I actually thought you messed this number up. He was 9 for 19 is crazy.
I looked at it on 3 different sites. I was like, is this right? 9 for
passes.
19.
He also had 56 yards on the ground. So, obviously a big fantasy week. Pierce was the guy, only 3 targets, but for 125, it was huge. It was spread around. Pittman was your main target guy. And then on the Texans side, Joe Mixon looked insane. I mean, really, there's so many things here to pick apart.
30 carries.
Mixon looked incredible. I completely whiffed on Diggs. I thought Diggs would be the guy that would like kind of taper back. Nico, I think, was exactly how everybody predicted. Dell actually had more targets than Diggs, but Diggs was the red zone guy. So I had him ranked low this week. So I'm going to eat that. How are you going to deal with the Texans wide receiver core? And what do you make of Mixon? I mean, do you think Mixon is going to be like the dude of dudes?
The offense was great. They scored 29 points. Mixon had 30 carries because he was trying to grind clock at the end, and it worked. I mean, this was just a great game from the Texans offense. And look, even though Dell was down on snaps, right? It was 65 for Nico, 62 for Diggs, and only 51 for Dell. He had 34 routes. So Diggs had 35. Nico had 33. So he actually had less than both of those guys. So I mean, start them all. They're all good. They're all viable. And Stroud looked really good to start. So I'm good rolling all those guys.
Yeah, I think this was like, we would ask that question of like, how can we start all those guys? You just had that answered. And Mixon just looked phenomenal. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where we also looked like the Ravens and we're like, man, how are they going to stop? How are people going to stop like Henry and Lamar Jackson with the passing game? The passing game is going to be more effective. The inverse is happening with the Texans. That passing game is so effective that it's making the running game even better. It's something to maybe pick on the Colts. Only other thing on this was you also saw Anthony Richardson overthrow A.D. Mitchell multiple times, which could have been for like huge plays. Because I don't want to be like, hey, is Pierce someone you want to start moving forward? But like, do you think there's someone else that's going to pop out of this? Do you think if Josh Downs is healthy next week, go? Or do you think Mitchell, once they get that connection going, he had a couple big routes. I mean, we could be talking about Mitchell having over 100 yards today if those couple balls weren't overthrown. Do you think like A.D. Mitchell's going to be a dude we need to watch?
I mean, yes, for sure. Obviously, I mean, I'm a Texas guy, but I think that Pittman is the main dude, and it showed that in snaps. Pierce is fine when he's out there, but I think when Josh Downs comes back, he's probably number 2. So I'm not showing love to Ashton Doolin, and I'm not showing any love to Adonai quite yet. They got it. Show it to me on the field before we go picking them up. Put them on a watch list, but don't go add them.
So don't go chasing waterfalls.
That's right.
when Downs is back, is it Mitchell or Pierce is the one? Because I mean, I know what you're saying. Like Pierce seems obvious from a talent perspective, except they love him. I feel like this happens every year. He makes these big, huge plays. Who's the one that suffers when Downs comes back?
When Downs comes back, I think initially Adonai suffers, but I do think Mitchell is better than Pierce and will earn that job eventually, which is why I'm not advocating to pick up either one of them. I think Pierce will go by the wayside fairly quickly, and it might take, a month or so for Adonai to really see snaps if Downs is back immediately. They're both seeing snaps right now, but it was 38-29 in Pierce's favor.
The Bears are going to be traveling to Houston. Oh boy. I mean, I don't know.
The Bears secondary played pretty well. It was Mel Levis.
I like the Bears defense. Like it was a rough start, and then they really honed it in, but it's just like Houston's defense, versus whatever that offense was that the Bears are putting out. Like, what's the force? What's the immovable force and what's the thing? The object?
Closer immovable force and unstoppable object.
Yeah, something like that. That's what's going on. Indy has got Green Bay. So there you go. Jacksonville, they could not finish it out, and one of the most brutal fumbles you've seen, especially for fantasy owners too, with Travis Etienne. Jacksonville lost 17-20 to the Miami Dolphins. We started the day with the weirdest story I can recall of Tyreek Hill being arrested, or you
see all the videos detained. Of it. I mean, they had him all on the ground in the handcuffs. Yeah.
I came on the live stream as it was happening, and Joe was talking about it, and then they transitioned the show to me, and we were like, "What?" And yeah, we watched all the videos, and he was speeding, and there was it looked like 30 cops. It was such a wild situation. Tyreek ended up doing Tyreek things. 7 catches on 12 targets, 130 for a score. Waddle went over 100. He was awesome. We saw 17 touches from Achane, only 10 carries, but we saw red zone carries. He ended up just going, I think it was 99 total yards. Tua went over 300. And on the Jag side, Lawrence was pretty disappointing. Etienne did have a touchdown, but he had that brutal fumble. And we saw more Tank Bigsby. So let's start with the Dolphins real quick. Any takeaway for you as far as Achane's usage? I think the thing that jumped out for everybody was Achane got red zone touches. And that was something new that everyone thought was destined for just Mostert.
Yeah, I mean, 17 touches I thought was kind of a lot. I always, and I kind of hold to this, I think Achane needs to be a 10 to 15 touch guy for the longevity of his career. So, but hey, look, I love it if they give Achane the ball more. I'm all about it because he is unbelievable with the ball in his hands. So it's just slight. He's slight of build. So I don't necessarily love that, but I'm down on Mostert. I mean, Mostert he had 6 carries for 9 yards. They had 71 offensive snaps, and this game was not decided.
He had 8 touches to Achane's 17. So Achane, can I say this? Double touched him? He double touched him?
I mean, it was 37-31 in snap count, and I do think this is probably still more of a hot hand situation than people want to give it credit to, right? But Achane is the guy. They started with Achane. He's the guy right now. They mixed in Jeff Wilson at third, and Jalen Wright wasn't even active. He had a great preseason, looked good in camp, not even active in this game. So, yeah, wheels up on Achane, wheels down on Mostert. We don't like it.
No. Do you have any takeaway with the Jags situation? Evan Ingram, one of the biggest disappointments this week, absolutely disappeared. Christian Kirk, as a matter of fact, of the main wide receivers, nobody had over 4 targets. The best, Brian Thomas Jr., he looked great, by the way. If you could get this guy 8 or 9 targets, he is going to be a top 15, top 20 wide receiver easy in this league. Gabe Davis led the way. Christian Kirk, one nice play, but what the hell happened to Ingram and Kirk?
I mean, just terrible game planning from the Jaguars side. Tank Bigsby had 12 rushes for 73 yards. He was on the field for 17 snaps in this game. He blocked on 1. He ran routes on 4 others.
But when he came in, he got the ball.
He's getting the ball. It's so unbelievably predictable. I just really don't like it. I mean, he was great, and Etienne wasn't great and had a fumble. So maybe that's going to be more even. I know, the last couple of years they've talked about getting Etienne fewer touches, and they just haven't done it. Maybe this is the year that they finally do it. But it was insanely predictable. I thought when Bigsby was out there, he was running. They didn't stop him. But, Lawrence, 12 of 21, just looked bad again. They're still not letting Lawrence run either. I just really didn't like anything that I saw from Jacksonville. And real quick on the Miami side, if you're thinking of Jonnu Smith as a replacement for these hurt tight ends, don't. He was not on the field at all. I think he had 20 snaps. Smythe had 20, and Julian Hill had 42. So he's third. Do not go add Jonnu, and he's a drop if you already roster him.
Is there any of the Jaguar guys that you're going to downgrade going into next week? Like I get, like we're talking about scheme and stuff like that, but like, does anybody get pushed out? We're all going to have to stomach the Evan Ingram stuff. I think Brian Thomas will go up. So I guess I'm kind of answering it. Like this is going to go to Christian Kirk. Do you think Christian Kirk is going to be a dicey play?
I mean, he might be. I'm not convinced that this is the offense we're going to see. I don't know how tenable this is, so they have to switch something.
So if you were to go buy one and you were to go try to get a trade, who would you target out of that offense? And anybody. Brian Thomas wasn't incredible, but like we know where his value is. You can go buy Thomas, you can go buy Etienne, Kirk, Ingram. That you probably only get the slightest of discounts on those top guys.
Ingram is the guy I would buy because people are disappointed. They're adding tight ends. If somebody grabs Likely, they're probably starting him over Ingram this week. So maybe I can throw something cheap, a piece they need or whatever, to get Ingram.
All right, we got more breakdowns. We got the New Orleans game coming up. We got to talk about Olave. But first, let's talk about our boys over at DraftKings because the fans have spoken. And we want to bet on touchdowns. That's right. NFL Week 1 is here, and the new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. And you can bet on those touchdowns. Guys, I did not have a great week as far as my props go, but I did put out a touchdown video where I gave you 3 and I hit on 2 of them. And we hit a plus 125 on Justin Jefferson. Thank you very much. And you can do that on DraftKings. And DraftKings, they have heard you and they are delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet those touchdowns. And ready to place your first bet? You could do it on Monday Night Football. Maybe try betting on something simple as picking the player to score a touchdown. You want the easiest one? Christian McCaffrey. That's a good place to start. Go and check out the odds today. I'm cashing some of those. I didn't cash my favorite though, but 2 of 3 touchdown calls, not too shabby. And DK is the prime place to do it. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on DK. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use Fantasypros. That's code Fantasypros for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5, and then you can get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer ends 9/19, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's continue on to these games. New Orleans, that was our survivor pick this week, and they smashed 47-7. Carolina looked absolutely abysmal. Breaking news, Carolina now hates Chuba Hubbard. They love Miles Sanders again. They don't know who they are, what they're feeling. And New Orleans, it just didn't matter. Rashid Shaheed, big play. Kamara, touchdown. Jamal Williams had a touchdown in there. Everybody was awesome, except the most important saint, Chris Olave. What happened to Chris Olave?
I mean, they just got up big and didn't really need to pass the ball a bunch. So
this is an aberration.
Yeah, I'm not where Olave still led them in
targets?
Snaps. I didn't see the routes run and all that, but it's Olave, and then it was Shaheed, and then it was Cedric Wilson. And I expect that to be, the trend moving forward. So
who would you rather have rest of season, Olave or Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I still I want them both.
Who will you find first? Who will produce a worthwhile week first?
I will say that Marvin Harrison will produce first next week. I mean, New Orleans has got Dallas, who look pretty good this week. So I'll take Marvin Harrison next week.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to kill you.
No,
Olave is
they're
the
both
big
high
important.
end.
Yeah,
I'm buying both.
And he's the big important thing here. Is there any takeaway? I don't want to sit on Carolina too much. Is there any takeaways there? I mean, the running game's abysmal.
Oh, it looked disgusting. Everything looks
was bad.
Awful. And look, it's week 1, and I get don't panic, but they looked bad in every phase of the game. On defense, too, it was miserable. On offense, it was bad. I guess the one thing that I would take away is Leggett had a little more playing time than I thought he was going to have because they talked up Mingo during the entire offseason, and they both had 35 and 33 snaps. This team should be down and losing by a lot, but if Bryce Young can't hit, I mean, they were miserable in this game, and Bryce Young had 13 completions. At what point do you go to Andy Dalton? I guess is my question. 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Because this was awful. This is not tenable. And Leggett looked good. No, nothing else looked good.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things in there. Like Deontay had 6 targets, which is good. Leggett, the target share up makes him probably waiver fodder
Mingo
for someone to look at.
helps him too.
Yeah, the problem with what you're saying, and this could also be a big negative, you say like, when do they give up? But like, why would you stunt the growth of who is your franchise quarterback unless you come to terms that he's
Because
not
you
your
have
franchise
other players on your team, man.
but you're also like, are you going to win any games? Like,
well, probably not anyway, but you have to at least get some stats for your guys. If this guy can't complete a pass, you can't lose by 40 every single week. And like your staff will lose their job, the front office will lose their job, and who wants to hit the reset button in Carolina at this point? So I guess the one thing that I'll take away for those of you needing tight ends is Jatavian Sanders played 43 snaps. So that was out of 59 for them. Tremble was down, but I think Sanders could be a guy that moves forward, of course. Also
one of 9 completions went to Sanders. Ooh. Is that right? Is that how many he completed?
Yeah. No, 13, that was 13. One of 13. Yeah. It was sorry. Thinking
of Anthony Richardson, who had like the best fantasy week. He only did 9 completions. Bryce Young, you could have given him 26 and it still would have been trash. New Orleans is at Dallas, and the Chargers are going to be at Carolina next week. Minnesota beat up on the Giants. Bogman was very confident about this one. Sam Darnold looked great. 208. He had 2 touchdowns. The pick, I don't even think was his fault. Aaron Jones, 94 yards on the ground, caught a couple. He scored a touchdown. We didn't see a ton of Justin Jefferson. Not that he wasn't out there. It just they didn't fling it his way. You saw Addison for a little bit, but Jefferson still had 59 with a score. We know Addison got a little bit banged up in this one. Let's start with the Vikings, and then we'll move to the Giants. Any takeaways here? We saw Ty Chandler a decent amount, which was actually kind of obnoxious, but that was also when the game was a little bit in tow. Jefferson, actually. Aaron Jones, solid. What do you think?
We actually saw more of Ty Chandler in the first half of the game, which was surprising. But Aaron Jones got it rolling in the second half. And the early stuff with Ty Chandler, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I like this, because they talked 1A, 1B at their running backs positions, kind of like Todd Bowles did with White and Bucky Irving in Tampa Bay, and it just didn't come to fruition. It didn't come to fruition here either. I mean, Aaron Jones is their guy. They paid him a lot of money, so I'm not too concerned about that. I think the thing that was interesting from the Minnesota side was that Brandon Powell actually played more than Jalen Nailor, who seemingly won that third wide receiver job. And with Jordan Addison down and a high passing offense, maybe Powell and Nailor, who caught the touchdown, could be waiver wire fodder over the next few weeks, depending on how long Jordan Addison is going to be down. So that was interesting. Yeah, a little shaky on that running back stuff, but nothing there to concern you from week 1.
On the Giants side, Daniel Jones just looked dreadful, absolutely dreadful. Malik Neighbors did not. He was making plays. He caught 5 of 7 targets for 66. I think that's inherently kind of your problem. Singletary was the main guy, but this game just got away from them. They couldn't establish a run. Daniel Jones was running early on, and then I got to say, I had this rushing yard prop, so this killed me. There was something I felt like it was like around the second quarter they just had stopped, because there were these wide open lanes where he just stopped running and he was like, I'll just throw to everybody's feet instead of throw at their feet and then run. He just only threw at their feet, and he just stopped running completely after like mid-second quarter. He looks really, really bad. Him and Bryce Young are vying for probably the 2 worst quarterbacks as far as fantasy goes right now. Any takeaway? Because we know Malik looked phenomenal, and I think maybe that's the positive, but he's going to be held down by really bad quarterback play.
Yeah, Daniel Jones did not look good. It's almost as if Saquon was pretty good and was holding this terrible offense together, right, Welsh? I don't know. That's weird. The guy scored 3 touchdowns on Friday, didn't he?
Can you imagine not ranking him 2 at running back this week?
Yeah. Can you imagine not wanting him on your football team because he's 27 or whatever? I can't. Yeah. But I tell you what was interesting from the Giants side, if anything, was 12 targets for Wan'Dale Robinson. So obviously, with Daniel Jones being as miserable as he is, it's a lot of short passes, and he saw a ton of targets. So eventually, I think those will get better. They're playing Washington this week, who was awful against Tampa Bay. So there could be a little light at the end of the tunnel for some of these guys. But I think the only interesting thing to really pull away, 2 things. Theo Johnson played way more snaps than any other tight end for the Giants as well. 59, I believe. Manhurts had 20. Bellinger had 16. So the rookie is the guy in New York for those of you looking for deep tight ends. We have a double tight end league, Welsh. But yeah, Wan'Dale getting 12 targets was the big thing to take away there.
Is Wan'Dale going to be a pickup this week? Like, are you going to start him next week?
Yeah, I mean, we expect the Giants to be losing every single game and playing from behind, and garbage time counts the same as anything else. So Wan'Dale with 12 targets is it's interesting. It's not he didn't perform well. He had 6 catches for 44, so he's catching half of those, but 12 is a lot. So it piques your interest for sure.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the Giants are at Washington. San Francisco is at Minnesota. The Chargers beat up on the Raiders 22-17. On the Chargers side, you saw Dobbins broke out. It definitely was my guy. Unfortunately, I was backing Gus Edwards for a touchdown this week, and I had been backing fantasy J.K. Dobbins. I didn't see the breakout happening like it did. 10 for 135 in a score Dobbins had. He also caught a couple. Edwards didn't do anything. And on the receiving side, we did see some even distribution, but McConkey was the one that ended up making the play. So I think that was a positive. I don't know, maybe more passing than people thought out of this Harbaugh offense, and McConkey looks pretty good. What's your takeaway on Dobbins and Ladd?
Dobbins is the man. I mean, he looked outstanding. He looked spry. He did get caught from behind, but corners are fast. I don't know what to tell you. Like, the guy's had 2 knee surgeries, but he was their guy. 10 for 135 is an enormous game. Edwards was okay. It's probably still going to be hot hand. Vidal was not even active in this game, didn't get a helmet. So those are the 2 guys at worst, but Dobbins looks good right now. And this is kind of as Tony Romo would call it, a meritocracy in wide receivers for them. You have to merit staying on the field. Josh Palmer got kicked out of the game for throwing punches. McConkey scored that touchdown late. So it's just, and Quentin Johnson made some plays. He did drop one again, like he always does. The hands are still miserable, but he made some plays. So a little more passing than we expected, and McConkey's looking good. Better to look good than bad.
And the thing I wanted to add too is you saw a couple teams. The Cowboys did this really dramatically today, where it was drives. This drive was Elliott. This drive was Rico. There was a bit of that with the Chargers, and I didn't think it was going to go that way. I thought you would see early down Gus, mid-round Dobbins, and then goal line to That didn't happen. That one, Dobbins held the whole drive. They got within like the 5. They were right there, the 6. They didn't bring Gus in. They went to Dobbins. That changes the perspective a tiny bit on Gus, unless they decide to completely change back. Because that was my big thing. He was like, top 12 in the league inside the 5 carries last year. Gus was, and they didn't come and bring him in when that situation was brought to them. They let Dobbins have that. Zamir White ended up having 13 for 44, a fumble that they ended up catching. We saw a lot of Bowers, your boy, Brock Bowers, 8 targets, actually led the way for the Raiders. So I'm guessing this is going to be a Brock take.
Well, Brock Bowers leading in targets, not even being 100% either, Welsh. Pretty nice to start for those of you that rostered him. I think the big takeaway here from the Raiders side is Zamir and Alexander Mattison were more split than we expected. I don't have snap counts yet because that game ended maybe 10, 15 minutes before we jumped onto the broadcast here. But that was way more split, especially early. I mean, Madison caught that big touchdown on first down. So it's not like he was only playing third downs and had a lucky play on a third down. They were mixing between both of those guys. Dylan Lobby didn't even get a helmet today either. So just interesting in the backfield. Maybe Zamir White is trending way down.
I agree. I agree. After watching that, I think he might be trending down in this is more of a split than anybody gave it credit for. Exactly what you were kind of laying out there. Devontae also had 6 targets, if you care. The Chargers are at Carolina and the Raiders are at Baltimore. So our boy Wormley will be very excited about that. Friendos, we got a couple more games, but want to remind you guys to check out our Discord, as we had that video earlier, fantasypros.com/chat. Because guess what? It's a free Discord. There's premium aspects to it, and I think you should sign up for it. But you can hang out actually with Bogman, Pizapia, and myself Mondays at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can do that for our show Out of Bounds. I do a show with Andrew Erickson on Thursdays as well at 2 p.m. Eastern, The Extra Point, where we're answering your questions. It's your chance to come and hang out with us. We've got an amazing community, so check out the community. hang with us in the podcast. You could be on. Do it today. And want to remind you guys about my playbook with the waiver assistant. We're talking a lot about these in the first couple, episodes and things going on this week are going to be heavy into that. If you guys are checking out my playbook, we've got the trade analyzers. We got autopilot to get you guys to set it and forget it on your lineups. This trade analyzer right here, answering your questions, have the pros with you. Waiver assistant can help you get ahead of the game while you're waiting for the podcast. So go and check it out. Download the app today, my playbook. All right. Last couple games here. We've got the Seahawks beat up Denver 26-20. Didn't feel as close as it got.
That was the line, by the way, was 6, wasn't it?
I think it was. Yeah, I think that ended up being a push. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ken Walker was great, 20 for 103 and a score. We saw Charbonnet do some stuff. He had a touchdown. Lockett was much more of a presence. The biggest disappointment, I really think, is going to be everyone thought, okay, it's JSN time. It wasn't JSN time. It was still Tyler Lockett time. JSN made 2 great plays. I think those targets were back to back, or they were like within 2 or 3 throws of each other, and there was nothing else. Are you concerned about JSN moving forward? I know you were kind of anti JSN kind of going into this draft season anyways.
Yeah, I was big on the Ken Walker and really the running game side on Seattle because I just wasn't sure what this offense was going to look like. I think Rubb is a very smart OC. Obviously at Washington, he had the 3 great wide receivers. He passed the ball a lot. You have 2 great running backs here and a shaky quarterback. I mean, Geno Smith's first throw of the game was picked. So he settled down. He looked a lot better in the second half. But yeah, I mean, Lockett on the field, we don't have snap counts yet. I'm sure they're probably pretty close, but Lockett was the first read on a lot of those plays. Even Metcalf didn't have a great game. So, and then they got up, and this was, Denver coming back real late in the game. So they were running the clock out a lot. I'm not as concerned as some people are going to be on JSN, but my concern would be more that they are focused on running the ball, especially if Ken Walker is saying he's fine moving forward. So yeah, just a little bit of an overall concern on JSN.
Somebody in the comments I noticed, and they're not wrong about this. They're like, this is going to be one of the weaker waiver wires that they can remember. Yes and no. Like, remember, if Likely's out there, like Likely's going to kind of like burst up. There's a few guys, but you're not necessarily wrong in that there's not a Puka at this moment. But I will say this. We had massive amounts of questions in the morning stream about Jaleel McLaughlin and a lot of people needing to make tough decisions, and they cut him. And I'm not going to try to make it out that Jaleel McLaughlin had a great day because he had 27 yards rushing. But what I do want to point out was he was a focal point in the receiving game, had 5 catches, 5 targets. I think he had 5 yards, I think, as well.
Yeah, 1 yard, 5 targets, 5
right.
catches, 1 yard, and lost a fumble.
But he also had more carries than Javonte Williams. And that's what we had been talking about if McLaughlin was going to be the big piece. So I set that all up to say McLaughlin might be the sneaky pickup this week for all the people that drop. We tried to, in best we could, say, hey, don't drop these guys if you can. Hold on, see what happens. McLaughlin might be a guy that got dropped in a lot of spots that needs to be picked up this week. But what say you? I mean, Javonte looked good in like the very first run, but 8 for 23. McLaughlin out-carried him, targeted him in the receiving game. Do you think McLaughlin is going to be the fantasy guy to own out of this backfield?
No, I'm still a Javonte guy. I like Jaleel. I have him rostered in a bunch of spots as like a bench guy of RB6, RB7, something like that. But I'm not actively going through to look for him. I mean, if you wanted to throw a little bit on him this week, great. But they're playing Pittsburgh next week, and Pittsburgh was pretty good on the defensive line, and it just looked real bad. Everything from Denver looked pretty awful. I would be surprised if there's not a little chatter about Zach Wilson potentially starting the next game, because Bo Nix had, I mean, I didn't get to see a ton of that game, but it was on the screen a lot because there are only 4 games up, right? And there were so many almost picks, turnover-worthy plays from Bo Nix. I was kind of surprised they didn't bench him at the end of that game because Zach Wilson had a decent preseason. Not that he's good, but he might be better than a rookie. So I don't know. Just the whole offense looked bad overall. So there's not too much to take away outside of how miserable they look.
But what about the one good thing about Knicks and his badness is Sutton ended up having 12 targets. Josh Reynolds had 8 targets. And was it Vele had 8 targets as well? Like, is there something there? And I know that there wasn't.
No, because he had 26 completions and he had 138 yards or whatever it was. Like, I mean, it was just all terrible from Bo Nix. There was not anything good about him at all here. So
is that one of the lowest? Do you think that's the
no,
most
it's not.
completions to low yards?
No, it's not that bad. But
someone give me this stat. What's the
not
lowest
good.
amount of passing yards for 25 completions a quarterback has ever had in the NFL? I need that
like
stat.
per catch, per
No,
reception?
I'm just saying, like, what's the lowest amount?
just the total yards.
A quarterback has completed 25 passes.
Come on,
What
you
is the
watched
lowest
Russell
passing
Wilson
yards?
last year? I bet Russell Wilson has three of them that are like that, maybe lower from just last season. So they're not great. It was bad, dude. It was just, I think the bigger thing is everything was bad there. Javonte, I'm more concerned about Javonte than I am like hyping up Jaleel.
Are you're gonna start Javonte next week versus Pittsburgh?
I'm trying not to. If I can avoid it, I don't want to.
Would you rather, if you had to pick one, full PPR, Jaleel or Javonte?
Javonte still.
I would go Jaleel because I think he's going to get 5 or 6 targets like Bijan. He'll be their version of Bijan.
I think it's just going to be a big old nasty mess for the rest of the year between all three of those guys, because Estime got involved a little bit as well.
2 last games here. Tampa whooped up on Washington 33-10. Mayfield went 289, 4 touchdowns. Rachaad White didn't do a ton. Bucky Irving had a big old breakout run. A lot of people in the chat talking about him. He had 62 yards on 9 carries. He was used a lot, but also I think it was when the game
was
out
in
of hand.
Yeah.
Mike Evans is absolutely incredible. Godwin had a touchdown, 83. Evans had 61 and 2 scores. We saw McMillan have a touchdown. Is Bucky Irving a thing? That's going to be the big thing.
I think, the fact that he looked good and the fact that Todd Bowles said we're going to run with hot hand, which I think he was more talking about that position overall than specific guys.
It seemed like the number 2, like we're going to do Rachaad White and then the hot hand of the backup. I took it, but maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, Bucky looked good. And again, better to look good in week 1 than look bad. So he put his best foot forward. Rachaad White needs to probably have fewer touches if he's going to last. He's had a good track record health-wise so far in his career, but I do think that it would behoove Tampa Bay to not give him so many touches, kind of like Travis Etienne, right? Like what they're doing with Bigsby. So maybe there's more of a mix between these two, but I still think it's 3 quarters to Rachaad, 1 quarter to Bucky. And he had a great game. If anything happens to Rachaad, it's nice to put your best foot forward and look good. So he's definitely at least a watch list guy. If not, if he's going to go for cheap, maybe throw a couple bucks.
Both of these teams, tough matchups next week. Seattle's at New England, and Denver is hosting Pittsburgh. The final, that was the other one I was looking. I'm sorry. Cincinnati is got.
Yeah, I just completely screwed up this game. I don't.
Okay. I was like,
I must have copy pasted incorrectly here. It would be Washington is hosting the New York Giants, and the Bucks are on the road against Detroit.
I like that. But I was about to skip past Washington, though. B-Rob, we didn't see the breakout from McCaffrey. McLaurin didn't do anything because Jaden Daniels, he's a runner. He ended up having 2 rushing touchdowns. He was good. But Brian Robinson, big focal point. And I think we all knew that Eckler was going to, be out of the backfield receiving and stuff. He had his 4 targets. But more than anything else, Brian Robinson seemed to have the important carries when they could run. He ended up having, I think it was a receiving it was a rushing touchdown, but he caught 3 for 49.
He had a receiving touchdown that came off the board on a penalty. Yeah,
that's right. But Brian Robinson, I think the key here, the guy, like he looked like a firm guy. So in that kind of questionable state, Brian Robinson, like Brian Robinson, Javonte Williams, I don't think is even a close matchup anymore. Even those guys were really close in draft season.
They were. Yeah. I mean, I have so many shares of Brian Robinson.
Is he a top 24 back in week 2?
I think for the rest of the year he's top
20.
Back. Yep. Right on that borderline. I think for the rest of the year,
play the chicken
guy.
19?
Well, look, I mean, we're going off of Jaden Daniels, the runner, right? So like defenses are going to key on him. It's almost like the mini version of Derrick Henry and Lamar. So it's the same type of game plan, and B-Rob looked good in it.
He did look pretty
McLaurin,
good.
Everyone's concerned about McLaurin. I'm not too concerned about the wide receivers for Washington right now. It was week 1. They were getting beat pretty bad. I think
great
this next
matchup
game,
next week.
Against the Giants, they should allow Jaden Daniels to pass the ball a little bit more, and they shouldn't be playing from behind. He'll be a little more comfortable in the pocket, perhaps as well. The Giants. The only good thing the Giants have, though, is a pass rush. So that will be an interesting game. But I do think it's going to get better for Terry McLaurin. So I'm not panicking quite yet.
Over rushing yards, Jaden Daniels next week, and go buy, if you can get a discount on Terry McLaurin this week, he should pop off next week. You know, Jefferson had the number one cornerback wide receiver matchup for going into this week. McLaurin's in a pretty decent spot, so I like that. Cincinnati's at Kansas City, Giants at Washington. Final game, the Dallas Cowboys beat Cleveland 33-17. Reminder, the Cowboys were a 2.5-point dog in that game. Whooped up on them. Watson did not look good. Offensively, they just didn't really have anything going on. The most brutal beat for me this week was I had Rico Dowdle rushing yards over. He hit it. And then his last carry of the game, he lost 2 yards and I lost it. I was a Rico bro, and I got to get off of it because they fully committed to series on these backs. Elliott, Dowdle, they really didn't break from it, and they prioritized more running when Elliott was there. So Dowdle is I think he's a cut if you need to do it. Like, do I want to? No, but he didn't do anything in this offense. So just that's a fat L. I'm out on Dowdle after watching this game. Anything else you want to take away from the Dallas Cowboys or the Cleveland Browns?
No, I mean, I don't know if I'm as doom and gloom as you are on Dowdle. I would like to, I haven't seen anything with snap counts yet though. I would like to see that before.
Elliott will have beat. I promise you, I haven't seen it.
I know he will, but if it's like 10, then I'm in. If it's 20, then obviously you have to be out. I didn't get to see enough of that game to know the snap counts. So let me see that before. But I tell you what, from this game, the thing to take away is just how bad Deshaun looked. Did you? I mean, Deshaun.
Oh no, I watched. I had the Rico
washed.
Dowdle bet. I was watching every answer. I felt bad because in the live stream, I was being kind of mean, and I kind of did the like, hey, listen, the Browns are how are they favored in here? Deshaun Watson is awful. I didn't see any comments or anything like that, but I was like, I'm being kind of like mean, and they may go out and Watson may have 3 touchdowns, but no, he just reiterated just like he's not good. Like
Jameis Winston. I mean, I would start Jameis Winston if I'm Cleveland next week against Jacksonville's a beatable team on the road. Jameis can pass the ball. He's gonna turn the ball over. We know that, but he's gonna pass the ball.
You have too good of a defense, and you actually do have like good weapons to sit by and let this $200 million mistake take down your franchise.
Right. Yeah. Let Jameis go in there and just sling it around. And I would rather see what happens with him than try to make this mistake. Like you said, keep working. It just is not working for them. And, I mean, none of the wide receivers are going to be really too startable. I'm not concerned about Amari because he had 9 targets and 2 catches, but I am a little concerned about everyone in Cleveland. If Deshaun Watson continues to be their starter, I think he'll probably last a month. He can't have 2 more games looking this bad though. They'll have to yank him. So just that is the big thing that I take away from that game is how bad Deshaun looked.
I'd be interesting on the Cowboy side to see if they use Lamb. They rushed Lamb like 3 times. I'd be interested to see if they do that a little bit more. But I think I'm not going to actually make any preemptive move with the Browns. I'm not trying to, cut anybody. Just you roll with your guys. The one in here is if you need to go and make a move, I will move off of Dowdle this week because I don't have any trust that he can be. He's no different than McLaughlin, and they went in opposite directions. McLaughlin ended up looking better and having more of the team's offense than you even had on Rico Dowdle. So it's not, I would cut Rico for Jalen McLaughlin this week. That's a move I'll make. But guess what? We'll find out all the moves that are going to be made because now we just get into week 2. This is reactions. We are going to hit waivers. We got live streams on waivers. We have the rankings episodes, start and sit. The whole bag is coming to you this week. So make sure you're subscribed to the podcast feed because we also have podcast only shows like the Discord shows that we told you about. Out of Bounds, Bogman and I with Pizza Pia are going to just be killing some of these things that just happen because it's a little bit more of a fun show that we like to do and have a little bit of a reverence. Fantasypros.com/chat if you guys want to be a part of it over on the Discord. And make sure you guys, and a lot of you guys are hanging out with us. We had, 1,300, 14, 16. I don't know how many live we had just even at one time. Tons of people on the YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, like it for the notifications because you can have a chance to win this awesome helmet, the Devonta Smith helmet, courtesy of our friends over at Pristine Auction. And make sure, we told you before, fantasypros.com/contest. You can fill out the sheet. You can follow us. There's multiple ways that you can win, and it'll tell you all about it. And we will be talking about it on this channel, and it will probably be this week. maybe even in one of the live streams, maybe one of the shows I'm doing. I don't know. So check it out. Bogman, that's it. You can find Bogman on Twitter at Bogman Sports. You can find me at Is It The Welsh. Ladies and gentlemen, our work is not done. Sunday Night Football underway as we're recording this, and we have Monday Night Football with the 49ers. So make sure you're locked in here to Fantasy Pros. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Let's do it all again, because we will. For Bogman, I'm Welsh. We'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros, the football podcast. Peace out.
See you.